Well, good afternoon. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. This is a different time, and live signings usually happen in bookstores, but to do it virtually with so many people able to connect at once makes it even more special. My name's Mike Tirico from NBC Sports, and one of the thrills of my 30 years of working at ESPN and NBC would definitely be being to the opportunity to call this man not just a friend, but a teammate and someone who is one of those phone calls that when you need to reach out to someone or somebody reaches out to you and you see their name on your phone, just makes you feel good. It's Jim Gray, 12-time Emmy winner, Hall of Famer, one of the elite interviewers and reporters in the history of not just sports television, but television. And Jim has taken his amazing 4 decades of holding a microphone, asking questions, his inquiring mind, all of that, and turned it into this wonderful book called Talking to Goats. As Jim Gray has penned some of the stories that are the moments that he remembers with some of the greatest of all time in sports. And Jim is certainly that in his genre. And it's an honor, Jim, to be here with you on this live signing day as we get ready to share this book and your stories with all of America.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's an honor for me to have you do this. I appreciate your friendship. Relationships have been the cornerstone of my life, as you'll read through this book if you get a chance to. And we don't have children, my wife and I. My mom's still alive and my brothers and so forth. So since we don't have children, our friends are our family. And you're part of my family. And I thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. We will not beat you over the head too much with the website, but we'll come close to it. premiercollectibles.com/goats, the way you can get an autographed copy of this wonderful book. And Jim, I want to start first with why. Why now? And why take your career and tell it the way you have, which isn't a chronological, it all started here, but it's almost a journey around some of the biggest names in the history of sports.
Well, I've had all these stories and they've just kind of started to multiply. And I've been broadcasting since I was 17 years old. I started back in 1977. I was a videotape editor, and very fortunately, they were converting from film to videotape when I was an intern in the sports department at Channel 9 in Denver with my mentors, Mike Nolan and Corey McPherrin, who I think are out there listening today, and Roger Ogden hired me at Channel 9. And I was in my edit booth one day editing the Broncos show, and Sue Tews came running in. She was the assignment editor. I'll never forget her name. She said, "You know sports? You were the sports intern." I said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "Muhammad Ali's 2.5 hours early at the airport. We can't find the sports anchors. We can't find the news anchors. Nobody had a beeper back then. Certainly cell phones had never even been thought of. If you didn't answer your home phone, you couldn't be found. So they sent me out to do the interview. Ali gave me 45 minutes. I came back. I was editing myself out. He was great. He was wonderful. He was terrific. Gave me the best compliment of my life. He called me the local Howard Cosell. And that just gave me so much confidence. Anyway, I came to edit myself out, and Roger, the news director, walked in. He was head of the bureau there. And he looked at this and he watched it twice. And when he was done, he said, "You and that tape are barely adequate. We're going to put this on the air." So I tell everybody I've been barely adequate ever since. And so all of these stories have just accumulated since then. And I just kind of decided that, all of this should be put down on paper. Stedman Graham, who is a brilliant educator, who is somebody who's written 14 or 15 books himself, said, "Really, this is what you need to do. Please quit procrastinating. Get on this and write this." So I got Greg Bishop from Sports Illustrated, spectacular writer, a dear friend now. Didn't really know Greg, just had read his work. And I had seen some of the stories that he had been involved in. And I said, "You know what? I know this from the inside. I wonder how he knows this." That's how good he was. So I called him. He considered, came back and said yes. And he spent the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, doing this with me. And he's been just a fantastic guy, brilliantly organized, great writer, and a dear friend. And he did a great job on this. This is his book. His name is on this book. As on the title page. And so I'm proud to be with Greg. And Stedman said, "Get it down." And so we got it down. He said 2 things to me in life: "Jim Gray, they're paying you to talk, just keep talking." And get this down on paper. So now I'm talking and it's down on paper.
I love it.
And
I
they know
love the way,
something about books, don't they? I mean, Stedman,
yes,
Oprah,
absolutely.
and they both know something about books. So here we are.
That's for darn sure. Jim, what I love is, having known you as long as I have, and having watched you even longer than we got to know each other in an amount of time, reading the book, it's you. Greg found your voice, you working on it with him together. It is really in your voice. And I've heard many of your stories. Certainly, there are a lot more in the book than I've heard from you, but I felt like I was listening to you tell the stories. You just have a way about it. And I dog-eared one page that was just my starting point. You just told it perfectly, the Ali story. There's nothing like just perusing through a book and you get to the end of a paragraph and it says, quote, "I would soon conduct my very first interview with the most famous person at that time on earth." And then it launches into the Ali story, which is just sensational. So I've seen you with all of these goats who are mentioned in the book: Ali, Jordan, Tyson, Kobe Bryant. We're scratching the surface, and we'll get to some of the names as we roll through. Presidents of the United States, several, told their stories in this book. What has made you seem very comfortable in the presence of true greatness?
That's a good question, Mike. Um, I've just always thought of myself as normal. Okay. So I've watched all of these guys with great achievements, but when you talk to them, they're laughing, they're smiling,
Yes.
they're upset with their kids. They're trying to teach you something. They get, frustrated when the phone doesn't work or you can't check into a hotel. So they kind of all act like normal people when
Right.
you get to know them. And so you see, and that takes some of that edge away and some of the intimidation factor away, because they're just normal folks who are achieving extraordinary feats. So they're abnormal in what they're able to achieve and the excellence that they attain. But they still have like red blood, and they still want to stay healthy, and they still have all of the normal quirks and flaws and all the things that we go through. So I think I was just comfortable because I'm comfortable with people. I like people. I like being around people. I like to talk to people. I like to listen to people. I found out that if you use your ears will never hurt you. So usually everybody wants to talk about themselves and nobody listens. But if you listen, boy, it's amazing what you can learn. So I learned that at a really young age and doing all these interviews. If I listen to these people, I'll gain more knowledge. And along the way, you can also gain their trust. So I just kind of found that was a good formula. And so I've just been comfortable. There's one person, and it's the very last page of the book. There's one person who I'm in total awe of, and I'm getting goosebumps now telling you this. One person caused me not to be able to speak. And of all these people, it was Carol Burnett.
Right.
Carol Burnett. She was just my whole childhood. I watched her show every week, and we saw her in a restaurant with Gary Shandling, my wife, Fran, and I was speechless, and I had goosebumps, and I said, "I can't talk because that's just how great you are." Well, she used to do at the end of her show, "I'm so glad we had this time together just to sing a song and have a laugh.
Yeah.
Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes the time we have to say so long." And she would tug on her ear.
Right.
So she did that in our audiobook for me.
Oh.
We have an audiobook, and Vin Scully reads the introduction. Bob Costas reads the preface, and he goes through the chapters like it's a lineup for a baseball game. Brilliant. Tom Brady wrote the foreword, and he reads the foreword. Carol Burnett is involved in the last chapter. And Snoop Dogg does the acknowledgments, raps the acknowledgments for me. He's been a friend for a long time. So it's something for everyone. And but Carol Burnett was the one that took my breath away after all the kings and queens and presidents and Ali and blessed by the Pope and so on and so forth. Carol Burnett. And when I talked to her, boy, she didn't let you down. She was everything that she was on television. So how great is that?
When they are larger than life, and then you meet them in real life, and they make such a large impression, it just makes you feel warm inside. It makes it all worth it. And that says it in spades. PremierCollectibles.com/goats to order your signed copy of this book. Here we are in late October. I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a sports fan in your life, this is a great gift. I mean that. I'm not shilling for a friend here. This is such a good gift. If you see some bags here and here, it's because I got the book in my hands over the weekend and I lost a couple of hours of sleep because I couldn't put it down, because I've heard some of these stories, but to hear them all, I wanted to hear the next one. If you have somebody in your life who you care about, you want to give them something, since we're all going to be inside a little bit more in all likelihood, this is the perfect deal. Jim, you mentioned Tom Brady, who you do a show with every week on Westwood One Radio's national coverage of the National Football League on Monday nights, Monday Night Football, on through the playoffs and the Super Bowl. And I hear that conversation, and there's a respect and a warmth. And as you said, there's also a friendship, and you can read that in Tom's foreword in the book. But I don't want to ask you about Tom. I want to ask you about the relationship, because you've found that perfect center lane of relationship, friendship in some cases, yet I'm still going to command your respect and ask you not the easiest questions in the world when the moment calls for it. How have you found that lane? Because that seems to be such a tough one for people who do this to find.
Well, I think you have to have it, and you know, it's you know, the first thing that's said in this book is something that, you know, it makes me sad and it makes me happy. It's what Kobe Bryant said, and right. What he said was just how I've approached this. He said, if I had one word to describe Jim Gray, it would be honest. It's very tough for reporters to be honest in the media business. So I've always felt that I had to be honest, that I had to ask what everybody wanted to know. And if that meant pushing somebody, then you had to push them. And Tom is great, okay? Everybody who is at this level that's great. There's nothing that's going to bother them about a question. They may not like it. They may not appreciate that you push them, but they understand and respect that that's what you're doing. You're doing your job. So, you know, I've done my job to the best of my abilities. I've wanted to ask the people these questions that were curious for me, because I think that what's curious for me after having watched the game is going to be something that everybody else wants to know too. We're just all watching the same game together. So that's how I've approached it. That's what I've done. I think that by and large, and you know this, Mike, because you interview all these guys all the time, I think what you find is they respect you. And if they have that respect for you, they'll keep coming back. Because there's never been ill will or malicious intent. It's just been a search for the answer, for the truth of what's gone on the playing field, what's gone on in front of us. And I was asked this question. Mike Tyson was so gracious to come and introduce me for my induction into the Boxing Hall of Fame. And we did something similar to this in front of a live audience that everybody was there. And somebody said to me, you know, Mike, has he ever offended you with these questions? I mean, has he ever aggravated you, made you upset? And Mike said, yeah, of course. And then they said, well, why do you do that, Jim? Why do you do that? And I had never had a good answer. And this is now 40 years into my career. And I finally said, this guy just got hit in the head 115 times by Evander Holyfield. Tom Brady's been sacked 6 times. He's getting hit on every play. Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson getting roughed up and elbowed. Do you really think that something that I might say after the beating that they've just taken is so much so that that's offensive or hurtful? I said, they've been hurt while they're on the field, in the ring, right, on the court. This can't be hurtful. It's just a question. And Sam Donaldson said it best. And I remember when I was in my edit booth and he was covering the White House, there are no bad questions, only bad answers.
That's right. That's right. I remember that statement.
So
the
true. Relationships are important to me. And the whole career is based on relationships.
It is.
And true friendships are reciprocal. And so you can't just always be taking and you can't just always be giving. And that's what causes it to work.
The Tom Brady forward is so Tom too, for those of us who have had the chance to speak with him. So the book starts with a bang, as Jim said, not just Kobe's quote in there, but the Tom Brady forward. Talking to GOATs, the moments you remember, the stories of Ali, of Jordan, of Tiger, of Kobe, of Michael Phelps, of Mike Tyson, LeBron James. As I said, if there's somebody in your life who's in love with sports, and you want to surprise them for birthday, Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever, just to get them a gift, just to say thank you for being so important to me during these difficult times. Signed copy of Jim Gray's book is an unbelievable thing to do. premiercollectibles.com/goats. Don't forget the S. And you can secure your signed copy. I've got some questions, Jim, for some folks who are watching, and I'm going to get to those in a minute. But I do want to ask you one last thing personally, because we can unpack the stories of Bill Walton, of Al Davis. You told the Ali story, of Mike Tyson, the Malice at the Palace, the basketball brawl involving Ron Artest, now known as Metta World Peace. Jim was the only one to talk to him that night there. That's in the book. There are so many of those stories, but there's one intersection that just grabbed me, and I said, wow. So there you are speaking with George W. Bush, and he asks you about Mike Tyson. And I said, that's Jim Gray. Jim Gray has access. He's interviewed, I believe it's 9 presidents. And here's Jim at that moment. He's going to speak with George W. Bush. And George W. Bush, the president, is leaning back on, this is before, he's leaning back on Jim Gray's experience with Mike Tyson. And your worlds coming together. That must happen often in the celebrity world, the political realm, the sports world. What is it like when those worlds collide and you're there with one asking about the other?
Well, in that instance, it was just a few short days before President Bush was running for re-election in 2004 against John Kerry. And so we had done a special on ESPN, the issues important to sports fans. So I got to interview Senator Kerry and then President Bush. And we were just outside of the Oval Office. And after the interview, he's going to the swing states because it's winding
it's like
down.
Right now.
Right, exactly. It's about this time frame, maybe even a little less. And he's going to Ohio and Florida and Pennsylvania and all these states in one day. And he puts his feet up and he's signing baseballs for the crew. And he says, I talk to baseball with everybody, but I want to know about Mike Tyson. Can you tell me about Mike Tyson? So I told him, I said, Mike Tyson's wonderful. He can recite Shakespeare and the tenets of Chairman Mao. He's got Days of Grace on his shoulder, Arthur Ashe. I said, this is a very, very learned man who has a tremendous amount of knowledge, knows history. I said, he's had some despicable acts and he's made a lot of mistakes, but he takes his own medicine, Mr. President. He does not blame any of his issues on anybody else. When he's at fault, he's accountable. And the president got a big smile and he just wanted to hear more. And there's a chapter in this book on first pitch, which I was very fortunate. It was one of the highlights of my career to be able to do that documentary with President Bush, a 30 for 30, on the night he threw out the first pitch, just a few short weeks after the tragedies of 9/11. And he decided, we're going to play baseball. We're going to grieve. We're never going to forget, but we're going to try and have some normalcy in our life so that things will go on. They'll never be the same, but we're going to try. And he went out there and threw out that first pitch. It was just a great moment, a great symbol for America. It had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with politics. And the Yankees ended up winning a great game. And that became one of the signature moments of his presidency, that in the megaphone. And when we did that 30 for 30, it was a terrific honor because he could have selected anybody in the country to do that. And it took me 12 years to convince him to do it. And he did it. And I'm proud of that piece of work. And great experience to have been involved with President George W. Bush and his father.
From Nixon to Trump, all presidents accounted for here in the book, talking to goats.
President Obama, great basketball fan. He was. Yep, he knows it inside and out.
It's wonderful storytelling. You'll hear it from Jim as you read the book again. premiercollectibles.com/goats. Some of you have asked questions. I could take the balance of the time over my left shoulder here asking my questions of my friend Jim, but I want to give you the time. So here we go. Jim, what is the most memorable post-fight interview moment? That is from Memphis, Tennessee. I believe it's Raleigh who asked the question from Memphis.
I may know Raleigh. Raleigh's a boxing fan. I think that's Raw Martin, possibly. Not too many Raleighs in my life, but it has to be the Tyson ear biting. It's got to be the most memorable. Because of the magnitude of that moment. Nobody had ever done anything like that, Mike. We hadn't seen anything like it. It lives forever now. And he came out and he had the wherewithal to come and actually do the interview. And, most guys hide behind a press release 4 days later, most guys would hide and say they can't. Most guys would not. They just wouldn't come and face the music, and he did. And then with that interview, you know, of the tens of thousands of interviews, I got that one right. I didn't walk away saying I didn't ask this question, or I stumbled on that word, or why didn't I think of that, or why didn't I follow up? Why wasn't I listening? Or why did the producer distract me? I walked away from that one feeling like I can't do any better. And
how often did that happen for you?
One hand out of tens of thousands.
Really? It's interesting.
Well, you know, when you leave the air, how many times do you leave the air and say, boy, I wish I'd have thought of that.
Yep.
Why didn't I get that out? How did I miss that?
1,000%.
Why didn't I hear Paul Azinger say that to me?
Right.
How come Tony Dungy, you know, I was distracted by the countdown. You know,
Exactly.
So there's always something. It's not that it's bad, or it's not that there's regret. It's just not perfect. And that one for me, right. Somebody else may not view it like that. That one for me was perfect.
And that's what I love about not just you, but I think it's a constant lesson to the people at the top of their industry and their field. You're always striving for even better, even if you get it right. The few times you get it right, you know, but you're always striving for that and continually evaluating yourself. It's such great perspective. Jim, here's another one. This is from Josh in New York. What was it like working with Kobe? We have such admiration for his dedication.
You know, it saddens me. I was in tears this morning doing an interview. Somebody brought up something that had happened with Kobe. He was, you know, I knew him as an infant, and saw the whole progression, and then obviously was able to chronicle and follow his entire professional career and his first game. There's a photo that I have right over here from Kobe, and it's in the book, from the first to the last. Love you, brother. Well, one of the first interviews he did that night on his inaugural night in November 3rd, 1996. Hard to believe. Think about this for a second, Mike. 24 years ago. How does that number just happen to come up? 24. So it's incredible. Irony that to the last, his last interview. I asked him that night how he wanted to be remembered. And the last time he was in his uniform, last interview he did, and he said, I want to be remembered as a guy who had all the talent in the world, but worked like he had none. What a great lesson. So I think that kind of answers Josh's question.
No doubt.
You know, he was a special guy. He was very loyal. He had thousands of acts of kindness that he wanted absolutely no recognition for or attribution for. And he could be tough, and he was a vicious competitor. And if you were in his way, get out of the way. And it didn't matter whether it was a teammate. He wanted to win, and that's all that mattered to him. He wanted to win. And then the great things that he did after his basketball career, he had moved on. Storytelling and girl dad, I think, will always be associated with Kobe for his love for his 4 girls and Vanessa.
So well said. So well said. I want to follow it up with this one, Jim. It's I apologize for looking down. I'm just reading the questions off my phone here, but I don't have a question. Just wanted to say congratulations. I'm looking forward to reading your book. That is from Sydney Daly, which I'm sure means something special to you.
Sydney's father, Chuck Daly, known Sydney for an awful long time, and that one touches me. Chuck was my best friend, so I appreciate Sydney listening and asking the question.
Special people. I know Chuck had a very important role in you connecting with one of the very important people in your life.
He introduced me to my wife, Bryant, who's right here listening right now. So you know, Sydney and I known each other. You know, Chuck was my first broadcast partner in Philadelphia. At prison, we used to do halftimes together, pre-games and halftimes. And he had lost his job in Cleveland. He had been an assistant coach with the Sixers and been at Penn as a head coach. And then he came back, and they put him on the air with me at Prison TV. And so we became great friends, and we had connected through Julius Erving. And that just led to a lifetime of great memories with Chuck, tremendous lessons, incredible wisdom, taught me just so much. And there's not a day that doesn't go by where I don't think about him. And with Sydney, obviously, with those championships, and her mother Terry, and in Detroit, and then the Dream Team, and then later on in life through Orlando and his golfing days when he finally he was a great man, and he's written about in here. He's acknowledged in here. He's missed and he's loved, and you couldn't have asked for a better buddy.
Great perspective. Some great stories. And the story about how Chuck helped you and Fran meet is wonderful. PremierCollectibles.com/guests. Jim's going to be signing books here on either side of our conversation with you here this afternoon. Now. Yeah, he's doing them right now, and they can be yours. So go online, order it. Like I said, for you or for somebody special in your life. Jim, let me hit you with a couple of others that are here. Just more general sports questions. What's the most bizarre sporting event you've ever been a part of? This person has a vote for your most bizarre moment, and it's one we haven't hit yet. Just briefly, his vote was, or her vote, was the Malice at the Palace. That must have been one of the most awful displays of sportsmanship.
That was a horrible night, and Bill Walton said, "This is a disgrace. This is just awful," and he said it exactly right. And you know, it was very, very sad. It was horrible to see. I'm very fond of Ron Artest, now Meta World Peace, and just did an interview with him. Just interviewed all the goats because Fox is so kind to give me an hour on November 15th at 10 p.m. Eastern time, prime time, to go back and talk to a lot of the goats. And so we've interviewed Meta World Peace as part of it, because the chapter on him, and we have Lonnie Ali, being able to speak on behalf of Muhammad and for herself, and Mike Tyson is in it, and Eric Dickerson, the original decision, and Dr. J, who speaks to my Philly days, and Chuck Daly and so forth, and Tom Brady is in it, and well, I guess I'll break the news right here. You're not going to believe this one, Mike. After 21 years, Pete Rose and I sat down and had an hour-and-a-half conversation.
Really?
Yes, and that'll be part of the special.
Oh, wow.
As will Mike Tyson.
That's awesome, because the Rose question's coming up here in the questions that folks asked. It was going to be one of my last questions for you, so I'm going to let somebody else jump in there, because the question is there one interview that you wish you could do over? And certainly that person had to be leaning towards the Rose interview and what that day was like. The tales that you tell about what we didn't see in your life right after that ensuing day and couple of days is so fascinating. But don't tell us about the interview, because we want to enjoy it. But what was it like to sit down and have a conversation with Pete, given the history that you two have?
Very pleasant. Very good. We had seen each other, and I talk about it in the book, but give you a little bit of a preview. We had seen each other several times over the years,
sure,
probably 5 or 6. And Pete did not walk away that night unhappy with me.
Mm-hmm.
We shook hands, and I had done the Phillies pregame show at Prism, and Pete was a Philly. And so we were well acquainted. I've interviewed Pete 100 times. Pregame show. I've been a guest on his radio show numerous times. He used to do a national radio show. If you recall, you probably were on it many times. So, we'd seen each other, and it was awkward when we'd see each other. We saw each other at a fight a couple of times. We saw each other at a mall, at a restaurant. And then this year I did a cancer fundraiser for the Pump Brothers. And they raised a tremendous amount of money for a hospital in the San Fernando Valley. And they asked me would I come introduce Mike Tyson. He was being honored. Well, little did I know, that same night they were honoring Pete Rose. Well, I'm sitting at the table with Fran and Mike Tyson and Kiki Tyson. Kiki's just wonderful. And I'm talking to Eddie Murphy, who's on my other side. And here comes Pete Rose. So I say to Fran, "Oh no, oh please. What is this going to be?" I didn't think it was going to be an incident, but I'm just thinking, oh my God. So he comes over and I stood up and Fran got out her camera and he says, Jim, you do a great job.
Wow.
And I looked at him
Wow.
and he says, you do a tremendous job. And my exact response was, Pete, you really don't believe that. You really don't believe that. He said, yeah, yes, I do. He said, it's been a long time. That was a long time ago. We're both in much different places now. And so we talked and we chatted and Tyson got up and he said to Mike, who do you think would have won a fight? Pete says to Mike, who do you think would have won a fight between me and Jim? Tyson says, there's no question about that, Jim. Of course it's Jim. So we laughed. And so anyway, when they decided to do this special, I thought, maybe we should have this conversation and see where things are. Really interesting, really, really interesting.
That's so cool.
I hope the public will find it interesting. And there's a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack in that one.
I can't wait. This is awesome. Let me wrap this up, Jim, with a couple of other items.
That's going to be on Fox News on the 10th, on the 15th at 10 o'clock. 15th of November.
15th of November. Okay, so that'll be a Sunday night.
That's right. Right after you're done with halftime, you'll turn it over and
flip over. Then you can come back to the rest of the game. But in the name of Jim's book, you can flip over. PremierCollectibles.com.
You would know that date off the top of your head. What day that was? What time that was?
I look forward to watching that for sure.
It'll be replayed. It was going to be replayed after the game and replayed, I believe, on Fox Sports. And
that's terrific. It'll be great. Just to see you and Pete Rose sitting there alone is worth the price of admission. So we mentioned presidents. We mentioned all the great athletes, all the GOATs. So Jim Gray has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And that's in large part because of Jim's connection with the community in Southern California, his excellence in this business. The places he has been are some of the biggest moments in the history of sports. But you also, Jim, have connections, relationships, friendships with the true celebrities in Hollywood. So my favorite chapter in this whole book, I'm kind of banging through the book. I'm going, okay, I got to get through this. Here's the Ali chapter. This is great. And then I got to chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the first 2-page chapter I've ever seen in a book. But it's the best story possible because it's Jim Gray at a fight with Michael Jackson. What? How? Go figure. How about how sports world and what you've done in the sports? I don't want to give away the chapter. How about what you've done in the sports world and how it has opened doors to all of these people who are some of the most famous people in the entertainment industry as well?
I'll answer that in 1 second. What did you think of those 2 pages?
They were unbelievable. I laughed out loud 5 times. It's phenomenal. And it gets you early enough in the book that you go, okay, I'm going for a few more because these stories are too good. It was great. It really was.
So your question is what's it like when they mix?
Yeah, just how you're a sports guy, you're a sports reporter, but it has opened the doors, this entertainment world, and they seem to almost feel very comfortable with you just because of the work probably, Jim, they've seen you do in the sports venues.
Well, they all come to Laker games. So the Laker venue has been huge, okay? Right. Plus the NBA. But if you go back and you trace it all back, when people who are successful, people who have high profiles, people who have done something, hit some stratospheric height of achievement or excellence, and they see you with Muhammad Ali, right. And then they see you with Dr. J, and then you're sitting there with Al Davis, okay, all right, and Mike Tyson's good with you, and they just see the lineage and they say, if that guy's okay with them and they trust him, then they're going to be more opening and more welcoming to having a conversation with you, or maybe getting to know you, or having a Coca-Cola somewhere, or hanging out in a hotel lobby. And it was so much different back then, Mike.
Right.
There wasn't all of the security that went on. There wasn't social media. Everything wasn't being chronicled by a camera. So a guy, Charles Barkley could go actually come down and hang out with you after a ball game in a hotel and have a meal And
Right.
people would come up and they'd want autographs, and occasionally somebody had a camera, and occasionally somebody'd be too drunk, and he'd have to react. but but it was just a different time and place where everything wasn't chronicled and examined with that microscope. So when they see you with these folks, they give you a chance. So that's why the chapter on my World Wide Web is so important, because it from being a ball boy and getting to know Marvin Webster has led all the way up until today, being able to talk to Tom Brady every week for the past decade plus.
Right.
So it connects all of the dots, and there's a web that has been woven. And so I'm just grateful to those guys, because when they carry you and you're on their coattails and they put you underneath their wing, they are opening all the doors, all the windows, and they're knocking down. The PR directors want to cooperate, okay? The team owners see that because they want to keep those guys happy. And so it just allows you access and the ability to prove your worth, and to be trusted, and not to overstep your bounds, and be able to have that access get you to do those interviews, to be able to ask those questions. And it's probably much more difficult now because of they have their own outlets with social media. So it was a fortunate time, and I'm still going. I mean, I'm not retiring,
No.
but if I think it's much harder now.
Yeah.
You have proximity because of your position. So, they're going to come to you for the Olympics, and Simone Biles is going to come to the studio, and Michael Phelps is going to be there. But if you're just a guy starting in Denver, you're going to have to work twice as hard now to be able to develop that relationship.
Such a good point. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's such a good point. And your work with those people is what has opened the eyes of the friendships that you've made, like you said, at Laker games, the access at the fights to the celebrities. They love to, the greats in other genres like to see the greats compete in person, and we've found that across sports, and when sports crosses to entertainment, and there's a constant appearance throughout different points of the book of Jack Nicholson, and Nicholson's been such a friend to you, and I want to wrap with Jack because we see him at the Laker games for years and years in that same seat, in that same spot. You have really grown into a very special relationship, friendship with Jack. What has one of the great actors of all time meant to one of the great interviewers of all time, Jim Gray?
Well, he's brilliant. He's so well read. He reads so much, okay? Constant novels and books, and he knows history, and he watches television news, and he doesn't just sample what he wants to hear to reaffirm his beliefs. He samples it all. So he's jumping all over the place, and he's watching sports, and he used to tape things. And he's got a wherewithal and a recall that's unbelievable. You can talk to him about what happened with, Robert Kennedy and the Kennedy days, and Dr. King, and all the way up to anything that's current. And he will have been there. He is the ultimate guy who has been in the room, okay? In the room where it happened. And, the thing that I found about Jack that's so wonderful is he's very public and he's very private. So I don't relay my instances and my conversations with Jack. I do in these because they're harmless and they're funny, and he'll get a kick out of them. And it's not like there weren't other people who could have relayed them either. We're playing golf in foursomes. We're out, but I think the other thing that is privacy is really important to a lot of these folks, Mike. So
Yeah, right.
you know from your background, what's public and what's private, and what can be shared and what's fun to share, and then when you don't want to go off that edge. And so I respect that. And I'm not there to be a reporter. I'm not there to ask questions. I do ask a lot of questions because it's my nature, but I'm not there to then go spill it, to whoever I think might be interested. It's not. It wasn't for them. It was for me.
You've built a lot of trust with a lot of people.
Well, you have to. You have to have that. if I don't trust you, Mike Tirico, I don't ask you to do this interview. I know where I'm at. I don't have to guess. I don't want to have to guess with people who are close to me in my life. I don't have to guess where you're at. Now, you may surprise me and you may do something out of character because we all make mistakes. We all do stuff that we wish we didn't do, or we have a slip or a faux pas. And that's just normal. But I know your character and I know where your heart is and I know your decency. So if I've made that assessment, not a judgment, if I've made that assessment and they've made that assessment about me, then we're going to have a great relationship. Because if I do slip, it's inadvertent. And that's just being normal. Al Davis said something to me one time. He said, do you ever get mad at people who don't stand up for you? It's in the book, that don't stand up for you, but you know that they know, and you know that they should. And I say, yeah, it does. Pisses me off, quite frankly, Al. He says, you can't be upset with that. I said, why not? He said, they're not going to immerse themselves in your problems. They've got families to feed. They want to keep their job. They're not going to take on what you have to take on because there's no upside for them. Don't be upset with people for being normal. Be grateful for people who are abnormal. So I've tried to surround myself in my life with abnormal people.
Yeah. And there are a lot of them whose tales you tell and whose trust you earned over the years to be in a position to have these experiences and moments. And it really also takes you through sports in America over the last 30 years to what 40 years, what Ali meant, was a simpler time, on through the growth of the NBA, the Jordan era, seeing Dr. J before that, the characters of those sports, 9/11, the Olympic bombing before that, the growth of television in sports, how the scene in Los Angeles and Hollywood intermixed sports and culture and personalities and these larger than life talents that you talked about. Jim always seems to end up in the right place, and usually ends up asking the right question that all of us would love to ask. We could spend the entire next 2 hours telling you stories in this book, but we reserve them for your reading pleasure because it is a pleasure read. premiercollectibles.com/goats. I'm going to ask one more question, and this question will come from, randomly, Richard in Beverly Hills. And Richard, because you're asking this question, you are going to receive a special signed page from the book, one of the title pages inside the book, that will carry the signatures of Jim Gray and of Tom Brady. How about that? How about we give that to Richard here? Richard from Beverly Hills. Richard, just let us know at the website how we can get in touch with you. Who is the one and only greatest basketball player in history?
Wow. Well, I'm going to hate to disappoint Richard because this is Richie Palmer, I think. And Richie owns Mulholland, the greatest pizza place on Cannon, I think, if that's the Richard in Beverly Hills. And he asks me this question all the time about boxing. Richie, I'm going to give you a book, but you're going to have to buy the book. Okay? Guess what? This is not a list of the greatest GOATs. Yes. This is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to tell you, the GOATs for basketball, and you put them in any order you want. They have an M and a J, a K, an L, a B, and a J in their names. Mix them up and put them however you want.
And there are stories about all of them in the book, which is the best part of the deal. You know,
those
Jim,
those are the basketball GOATs. They're on the cover.
That's right. There they are, right there.
But there's only one GOAT. There is only the GOAT. The GOAT, man on top.
And that's where it started for you.
And exactly. He is the GOAT. He called himself the greatest of all time. Yep. He came out with the original book, which is a huge, big Taschen book called GOAT, of all the pictures of his life.
Yes.
And so Ali gets the distinction.
And he's the seed for where all this starts and for all of us to enjoy. Jim, the coolest thing about this was I can hear that this project and process has been emotional for you. Because you took many flights, many dinners, many hours, and now it's all written here forever for people to share and experience. And if the process was emotional for you, it was energizing for those of us who have read it, and memorable for those who will read it down the line. Thanks for your time, your talents, your friendship, for sharing this with all of us. To you and Fran and your mom, and rest his soul, your dad, who was so inspirational to you and helped open so many of the doors that you have sprinted through to incredible success, and was one of your favorite events of your career, the Masters. I know you shared that with your dad a whole bunch of times. I know you'll be thinking of him in a couple of weeks, right when the book hits national sales, November 10th. And I'm sure if he was here, he'd be reading it with a smile on his face. And may his thoughts and his good feelings about this be part of what we all share as we go through this experience. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for doing this. You're the best of us. Okay. You got the mantle. All right. As Bob Costas has stepped aside and I got to work with Bob. Bob was the best of the best. And now you've taken over and you've done grace, distinction, and total class and dignity. And it's an honor. It's an honor to have you as a friend. I thank you for doing this. I want to thank HarperCollins. I want to thank Morrow and Vetica, who've been great. Jan Miller, who's been outstanding. And once again, Greg Bishop was with me on this entire process. And he's a great writer from Sports Illustrated. And he did a fantastic job, and I'll be forever indebted to him. And so thank you to premiercollectibles.com/goats for having me on. And once again, thank you, Mike. I watch you with great admiration and tremendous respect, and we all can only wish to be as good as you are.
You're too kind. Thank you, friend. Thank you all for spending your day with us. Grab the book, get online, and order it for a friend. We hope to see you down the road. Take care.